the third and final book of this initial recording session is a book that you may never be able to read because I don't know if it's in print anymore. But it's called Paint My Body Red by Charlotte Witvoet. Charlotte, for context, I know Charlotte. We went to school together. She's a couple years younger than me, but we spent plenty of time hanging out. I was mostly around her for the time that this book was being edited and then in the publication process of this book. With that being said, although I have one of the original copies and one of the initial copies, in fact, it's signed by Charlotte, it's signed by Ashley, who the dedication is to, and it's signed by Petra, who does the cover work, I believe. I believe that's Petra's contribution to this. So I have one of the original copies, which is fun. However, it took me almost 2 years to read this book. I've owned it since around the beginning of 2020, maybe around mid-2020 was when this book was published, and I did not read it until January of 2022. That is because of the content that this book is about. This book is inherently about suicide. And it was just something that I was not sure if, at that point in my life, for the past 18 months, wasn't sure if it's something that I wanted to read and be comfortable reading. But eventually, I was able to do it. I felt comfortable enough to do it. And I read it. And it is a good book. This book is written in kind of a two-way form. It goes into, our narrator in this is supernatural in a way, but I would not consider it a supernatural literature. I would consider it realistic fiction that happens to have a ghost as a narrator for part of it. This book kind of goes between what we consider to be the present and the timeline of the present and the past events that lead up to the initial point of suicide. And so in my first reading, in my only reading of this, I read it through in the way that is presented in the book. If you wanted to, and I think this might give you a slightly different reading, you could read this in the way that it is chronologically set, which I think would be an interesting read. I don't know how much you would get out of it, but it'd be there. This book, you can tell that it's really kind of the first foray of an author, and that's not to be mean to Charlotte, but as she puts in her initial introduction, or preface, right, it contains a lot of things that are very personal to her, which is great. And for me, knowing Charlotte and knowing her around the time that this was written, I get so much more out of this book. I would argue that how I read this book is entirely dependent on the fact that I know Charlotte, I know the people around her, and I believe, without talking to her about the way this book was written, I believe that I can connect characters to people, which heavily influences the way that I read this book. I read this book as a foray into a what-if situation. I believe this was kind of written as a what if I had gone through with it, and the falling out and outcome of the friends and family that surrounded her. I don't know if that's the actual interpretation. I've not asked Charlotte about the actual interpretation, but that's what I read it as, and I can see the clear connections to it. So that's that. I'm gonna link something of Charlotte's in the down below, which is this book really kind of put her into the spotlight a little bit, not a whole lot, but at least a little bit, into what this means for mental health and mental health of teenagers, and how to deal with it, which is just super, super impressive of her at this age. Charlotte is, I believe, 3 years younger than me. I want to say 3. I want to say that I was a senior when she was a freshman. But yeah, I look forward to seeing if Charlotte publishes anything else. I really hope she does. I haven't heard anything about anything that she's working on at this moment, but I really hope she does, because this is a fantastic book. With that being said, rating-wise, because I know her and because I can see connections, I would give this a 6 out of 10. I think this is I believe, from my reading, it's a fantastic book. Is it going to become an American classic? I don't think so. But that's not a problem, right? That's not an issue. Not all books have to become classics to be good books. With that being said, if you, the viewer, and you're not me rewatching this years later, can find a copy of this, but don't know Charlotte personally, it's probably going to be lower, because there's some throwaway things in here that I enjoy and find silly, but don't necessarily make sense without the context of everyone else in Charlotte's life. Yeah, I would think that if you read this without knowing Charlotte is probably a 4.5 to 5, maybe. I think you'll still get a lot out of it, and I think you'll still enjoy it. But you have to be willing to read some rather gruesome things. You have to be. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to get through this book. Straight up. But yeah, that's it. Paint My Body Red, Charlotte Witvoet. If you can find it somewhere, I don't know if it's still for sale or not. If you can find it somewhere, buy it, read it, enjoy it. I think it's a great thing to have. Will it be a classic? I don't think so. But that's okay. Not everything has to be classic to be good. That's my thoughts on Paint My Body Red.